a lovely afternoon. But I'd like to welcome you all, and particularly we have some members here from Swansea and Bridgend and Cardiff, so a very warm welcome to you as well. And I think that we're in for a very interesting and informative afternoon. And I would like to introduce Hilary Jones, who is she's a member of the she's a trustee for the network of U3A of Wales, and so she's come down here today to talk about Japan because her son lives there, and she and her husband have visited Japan several times, and she's brought back a few artifacts, and she's a great quilter too. She's made a wonderful quilt, and you can have a look at those afterwards. So just sit back and we'll look forward to hearing from Hilary Jones.
Right, first I need to just check that you can all hear me. Yes? Thank you very much for inviting me. It's really nice to see you, and I'm just going to explain a little bit about the talk. Japan was never on our must-visit list. We really didn't know much about it, but our son Daniel was hooked from the minute he knew about it. He had made great friends at school with Japanese people. He then decided to visit the country to take a business and Japanese degree, and then in 2008 said, I think I'll just go and try living out there and working out there. I said, okay. And he had some friends that he said would take care of him, and he could stay with them until he got established. What we didn't know was there was a woman involved. We found out later that he had met Aki at university, gone out together as 18-year-olds, then lost touch, got back in together again, and anyway, he went out and stayed with her family. And about 3 months after he went out there, at the end of 2008, we got a phone call and said, I'm getting married, Mum, next week. Which did throw me a bit, because you know how you do. Well, certainly if you're a woman, can I get an outfit? Can I get a flight? You know. And then he said, but we're only just the two of us, but we're going to have a full Shinto shrine wedding in a year's time, when it gives the family a chance to plan and come and help us celebrate it. So suddenly Japan became our top place to visit. So my talk is just going to show you some of the things that we have discovered in our 4 visits to Japan. Just so that you can see, it is a long way. It's well over 5,000 miles to Japan. Takes about 24 hours for us to get there, and they live in Kawasaki, which is there. Just south of Tokyo. I'm sorry about the sunshine, by the way. I did ask him up there, but he didn't switch it off today, so I hope you can see it. Now, they live in Kawasaki, and so I thought you might be interested to see what a Japanese home is like. This is the advantage we have, is we don't stay in a hotel, we stay with the family, and that has been a wonderful bonus. The first time we went out there, we were very apprehensive because we'd been invited to stay with Aki's parents. And I thought, how do you communicate with somebody that doesn't speak your language? We don't speak theirs. And Japanese is a difficult language. From the minute our feet touched the ground in Japan, we laughed, and it was great. There's normal street. You know, looks like it could be anywhere else apart from the strange things. Narrow streets, they're very short of space in Japan in general, and certainly in the big cities. They don't have front gardens, they don't have back gardens, no pavements, but you know, it is very different from here. This is their house, and they are privileged because they've actually got 4 parking slots along the front here. very rare. This is the extent of Mitsuo's garden, which is just right in front. They live up here. For some reason, they spend all their time on the one floor, and then Mitsuo built this extra bit up here, which is like a garden, and in the summer they spend a lot of time up there because the temperature does go up to, the upper 30s. And so that's lovely. Inside, I don't know whether you can see that clear enough, but that's the kitchen, and the kitchen sort of fits on the end of the lounge, and it's tiny. It's the size of, well, I don't know, it is tiny. There's a sink there, there's a big breakfast bar there, and we've had probably 10 or 12 around that. She doesn't have a proper cooker. She has a microwave and a small gas hob that is here and here. And she does all her preparation on a little ledge like that. And Aki's mum is a traditional Japanese woman, and she does lots of little dishes. She doesn't do one big one, she does lots of little dishes. I'm jolly glad I was never allowed to do the washing up, because there's a lot when Mirko cooks. This is the local park. These gentlemen are playing shogi, which is a form of chess. And you can see weather's beautiful. We've always had lovely weather when we've been out there. And they're sitting round under the trees. There's a big play park in the background. This is about 5 minutes from their house. It's in the grounds of the local temple, and it is so safe. If we go out there, you can leave anything. I mean, these bikes, for instance, could be left there all day, and you come back and they'd be still there in the evening. This is the local temple, Kawasaki Daishi. This is the beginning of Golden Week, which is a week they have at the end of April, beginning of May, when they run all their bank holidays together into a week. So the whole family has the time off, and the whole family spends the time together. Lots of things done for the children. I think that's the one where there is an acrobat, which you can't quite see because of the clarity. But there's all sorts of lovely activities going on for the children. This temple is amazing. We go there every time we go to visit them. We go in and out of it, and our son keeps saying, "Why do you keep going back there? You've been there once." But it's just so different from our churches, our cathedrals. Beautiful monks inside and wonderful chanting and drumming. It is quite amazing. And whether you can see there, that is, I didn't want to go inside and take a photograph, but all the people are kneeling. Their shoes are left outside. The Japanese can kneel for hours. We last about 5 seconds. And again, in the background, there are the monks in green, and they are chanting. They have a furnace at the back. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And wonderful rhythmical drums that go right the way through you. Fascinating. Sumo wrestlers. This again is Golden Week. Now, we've never actually been to a sumo wrestling match, but they were there. This is a modern part of the temple. They were there for the children, and the children were allowed to go and wrestle with them. Well, I mean, you can see some of the children. And, of course, the children always beat the sumo wrestlers. Always. They were wonderful. They were really the epitome of big, gentle giants. And, they put a bit of a performance on, and then they'd fall over, and the children would be thrilled, and the prize was to get a photograph with these sumo wrestlers. They were lovely. It was so lovely to see that. Food. I think we all like food, don't we? We found food was a great icebreaker. It's surprising when you have a couple of beers and you start talking about the food. You can communicate, and the food out there is gorgeous. First time we went out there, I took chocolate with me in my suitcase because I thought with, the odd bit of fish and a lettuce leaf, I'm going to be hungry. And it came back with us because the food was fantastic. It was always beautifully fresh. This is the inside of a typical Japanese restaurant where you appear to sit on the floor, but there is a footwell under the table. You will have left your shoes in at the outside, and the footwell is always heated, so you don't go home with cold feet. that's just to show you how they present it. That's katsudon, which is, I suppose, the equivalent in popularity to our fish and chips, because it's a very, very popular meal over there. Pickled ginger in the top, but I just love the dishes that they're presented with. The Japanese present their food beautifully. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I hope you've all had lunch, because you might be hungry. This was chicken. That's a bento box with all sorts of different sushi in it, and whether you can see the sushi, all beautifully presented. That's a sashimi salad. Sashimi is just slices of raw fish, and it's beautiful. There's scallops. That's salmon roe, I think. There will be squid there and tuna, all raw. And I am not a fish eater, but we vowed that when we first went out there, we would try everything. And I've never regretted that, because the food is lovely. And eating that sort of fish, it is so fresh. It's like eating a really beautiful steak. Lovely. And, as you see, beautifully presented. That's more sushi. See, this is the salmon roe, and it's served with seaweed. Seaweed's nice too. It's a very healthy diet. The Japanese live far longer than us, because of the diet they have. This is omelette and spring onions, I think, with the other fish. More omelette and these lovely prawns. That was a meal in a restaurant with tempura, which is a very light batter, and it's vegetables or fish just dipped in it and fried. They do have a very healthy diet, and there's the inevitable miso soup, and somewhere will be green tea as well. This is one of our visits. We went over at Christmas, and we went out on Christmas Day, because they don't celebrate Christmas really. They do for children, but we went up into the Japanese mountains, and we visited a wonderful place I'll show you in a little while, and part of the deal was a meal, and everybody had this bento box with all sorts of little things in it, little tiny fish, bits of noodles, and they served hundreds of them in this place. But in the evening, we went back to our hotel, and we donned our yukata, which are informal kimono that you wear, I suppose, like a dressing gown, only a bit smarter. We did have to sit cross-legged on that. I think I fidgeted the whole way. But we had our own private room, and we had an 8-course Japanese banquet. There was no Brussels sprouts, there was no Christmas pudding, no turkey, but it was fantastic. There we are, that was one of the courses. There's the dinner menu. You can see 25th of December 2013. Thankfully, they were only small portions, because when you have that many courses, it's quite filling. That's persimmon jelly, I think. This is sake. You have more sake than anything else, a rice wine. I can't say I'm terribly thrilled by it, but if you consume it in enough quantities, it's quite alcoholic. We all had little burners, which was a bit frightening with a little one running around, but we cooked I think that, yes, that's Kobe beef. It's very, very expensive, very fatty, which is supposed to give it lots of flavour. My husband loves it, but I found it too rich, but it's a real delicacy over there. And you cook that on your burner, served on a magnolia leaf. Pudding, a little bit of fruit, just enough, you see. And I will say, I'm going to brag, we've never touched knives and forks over there. Before we went out the first time, we sat at the kitchen table with some raisins and chopsticks and practiced picking them up. And it worked, and the Japanese were very impressed. I think, when in Rome, you should do as the Romans do. So when you go to Japan, you should eat with chopsticks, and we did, and we haven't starved. Changing tack. They have a lot of wonderful traditions and ceremonies, and we've come across some of them, and they really are very, very interesting. So I'm just going to show you a few of these. Sorry. Whenever you go to a temple or a shrine, They all stand in front of it, put their hands together and just bow to the gods that are inside. Sometimes there's a rope hanging down and you give it a good yank, which rings a bell to wake up the god so he can listen to what you're going to say. They aren't religious, but they follow these little ceremonies. And when I asked Aki about this, she said, well, we're hedging our bets. We've got a lot to be thankful for. We're fit, we're healthy, we've got jobs, we've got healthy families. Why not say thank you to whoever you want to say thank you to? Again, you can't quite see that perhaps, but it's again approaching the shrine and just bowing. This is one of the festivals, May the 5th. I wouldn't normally do this because I'm sure you can all read, but just in case you can't see it clearly, this is the boys' festival for expressing the hope that each boy in the family will grow up healthy and strong. Warrior figures are set up in the house during this festival, and huge fish-like streamers called koi nubari, or sometimes flags of a warrior called musha nubari, are fastened on poles. It's definitely still a male-dominated nationality. The men are king, they always think. The power behind the throne, the person that deals with the finances and the organisation is the women, but the men do take priority. There are the koi nabori, the flags. There's a miniature one over there later on, the lovely thatching there. This is Kabuto, and this is our grandson's. It will become a family heirloom because it cost his Japanese grandparents, not his Welsh ones, his Japanese grandparents, a lot of money to buy. But it's a samurai warrior's outfit, and you can see there's a waistcoat there. I think that's his name, Shunto, and he's got a bow and arrow, and that's his helmet, and it comes out for a month around May. It's beautiful. I'm sure he appreciates it. He'll stand and pose by it very happily. Another ceremony was the fire ceremony, and we went to Kyoto for this, and this is the temple. Can you see this? Is it reasonably clear? Because I can see it much clearer on the laptop. And there's a big temple behind, and it has a big balcony around just below the roof. And they send fireballs along this balcony. This place is made totally of wood, and they send fireballs along the balconies from one end to the other. They've never had to call the fire engines out yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. And it's to burn away the old year and set in the new year. And I don't know whether you can see the tiny glimmers of light here. These are all the thousands of people that are watching, and they are filming it on their phones. And I will say there were thousands watching. Nobody pushed, nobody shoved, nobody elbowed anybody out of the way. The Japanese are very respectful people, and they respect your space. It was fascinating to see it. Omisatori, I think, is the name of the fire festival, and only happens rarely. This is a money washing ceremony, and this is our daughter-in-law Aki, and you go to this shrine, you put some money in a bowl, you burn some incense, there's your money, and then you take it into this cave and you wash it, and it's supposed to instantly get a whole lot more, and you become very wealthy. Well, to be fair, they've done quite well, so maybe it works, but again, it's interesting. All done very seriously. I mean, the incense, that we've come across that in every shrine and temple that we've seen, and they waft it over themselves to cleanse themselves before they go into the temple or the shrine. So there's Aki going into the cave. Lots of these hanging down, and they're paper cranes. Paper cranes are a sign of peace. This is, of course, the famous tea ceremony, and we were very privileged the first time we went there because this lady is a sensei, which is a teacher, and she's a teacher of the tea ceremony, so she teaches other ladies to perform the tea ceremony, and she happens to be a friend of the family. So we had a privileged private tea ceremony with her. Some of it was lost in translation because you actually had to be completely silent during the ceremony. We talked about it afterwards, but there is a lot of traditions in the way she moved her hands and the order she did things. There's a burner here, and this is the tea. No, it's not. Let me just have a look. No, that's the little mixer that she's got there. There's the water container, or the scoop that she lifts the water out, pours it into this dish, and then mixes the tea with it. And it's all done in a certain order, all beautifully done, with great symbolism. This is a special area in a Japanese room called a tokonoma, and it always has a bit of calligraphy and a bit of ikebana in it. You don't dump your shoes or your shopping bags there. That would be a no-no. There she is mixing the tea. I have to say it was horrible because it's very bitter. It's very strong, that sort of tea. If you go to a restaurant, you will almost get green tea like you would have a glass of water, and that tea is very light and very thin, so it's very cleansing, but this is very thick. But of course it would be incredibly rude if you didn't drink it. So once you are given your bowl of tea, now I'm going to just move back. When you're given your bowl of tea, you are given it in a beautiful porcelain bowl, and you turn it 360 degrees so you admire it all round, and then you drink it all up, and then you hand it back. But it wasn't very nice. This is, again, at Golden Week, where the children, the Japanese children, are being told and taught the tea ceremony by the local monks. Here we are, local monk filming it, but there they are teaching the children how to do it. We sat and watched, and then got handed green tea with great ceremony and lots of very deep bows by the local children. The older you are, the more bows, the lower the bow is. So I mean, we're perfectly safe with that because that shows respect. They have great respect for us older people. And that was done beautifully. See the lovely kimono there with Oyobi. Now this is another thing that we find at all the temples, and that's your fortune. You can have your fortune told, and you shake this thing, and out comes a spill. You match the number on the spill with the draw there, and you take the paper out. Then you get somebody that can read Japanese, not us, to translate it. If it's a good one, you know, you're going to win the pools next week, or you're going to have a lovely holiday, you're going to meet a handsome fella, then you keep it. But if it's not so good, you just tie it on the local tree and the wind will blow the bad luck away. See? I think it's very sensible, isn't it? And this is another thing that you do at New Year. You get a prayer board. I think the next picture, yes, there's the prayer board. I'll go back to that one. And this is the prayer for the whole year. You want, obviously, good luck, good health, prosperity, and you go and order it at the local temple, and it will be taken into the temple just before New Year to be blessed, and then you go and pick it up later. The next year you take it back to the temple, you order your new one, the old one goes in the furnace that I told you about at the back of the temple and burns all the good luck that might have attached to your prayer board, and your new one starts the year like that. That's the grandson's one. His is smaller. And there we are. This is the temple being dressed for New Year, because New Year is the time that they celebrate much more than Christmas. New Year is staggering. When our son told us about it, we thought he was doing his usual thing of exaggerating, but he wasn't. 3 million people visit the temple 5 minutes away from them over the fortnight of New Year. You just go, and they queue up. They walk along the streets. Here are all the stalls selling all the food. That's the sort of thing they sell. We did decide we weren't going to try that. But the streets are jam-packed full of people, all very carefully, very politely walking. It would take 2 hours from the station to the temple at New Year to get there. Normally it would take you 5 minutes. It's that many people. We just didn't believe it until we saw it. We stood there at the side of the street and just watched these hundreds of people, thousands of people walking up to the temple. And all they did was walked up to the temple entrance, threw a few yen in the bucket, bowed, turned around and went back again. But you had to do it at New Year. It even says, walk slowly. There is a little bit of English there. Very interesting. Special places. Whenever we go over to Japan, we have a trip within a trip. Yes? Sorry, say.
When is Japanese New Year?
Same time as ours.
Oh, it is.
Yes, it is. It's interesting, isn't it? That, you know.
In China, it's different.
Yeah, that's right. And doesn't it change in a different? Yes. No, they're exactly the same in Japan as we are. Thank you for raising that. And that's just so you can get an idea. Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima. I'm going to mention these because that's where we'll visit. Mount Fuji. You will all have heard of the earthquake and tsunami in 2011. That happened up at Sendai, and there's Fukushima, where the nuclear power station was. That was very scary. I'll mention that for a moment because Dan had been out there a couple of years and we hadn't heard it. A friend said, I think you ought to turn the news on. And there was the news that that awful happening. And we were just so touched by the number of our friends from around the world that got in touch with us and said, is your family all right? And thankfully they were. Did take Aki 5 hours to walk home from work because everything stopped. Even the train service, which is always on time, but it actually stopped because it was such a violent earthquake. That is one of their bullet trains. If anybody ever goes to Japan, do have the experience of travelling on one. It's wonderful. It's just like moving on a carpet. Lovely, comfortable seats, beautifully dressed attendants in outfits that are immaculate. They walk into your carriage and bow to the whole carriage, have a look at your tickets all the way through, and when they get to the end, they turn around, bow again, and go out. It's an experience. And it's not ingratiating, it's just respectful. The Japanese do have respect for people. Another one of them. And this one, it's a bit of a blurry picture, but it is quite a rare picture. Not many Japanese even see the yellow Shinkansen, and that's an engineering one, and they run it along the lines to check that everything's okay, because it travels at about 200 miles an hour. And yet it doesn't feel like that when you're on it. Really quite amazing and a wonderful experience. And we're travelling at 200 miles an hour when I took these next two pictures. And of course, this is the iconic Mount Fuji, Fuji-san, as he's known as. And we didn't see it the first 2 times, but when we went in the winter time, the air was clear enough for us to see. And I just thought, God, that's just like the pictures. Which is silly, isn't it? But it just was extraordinary to see it like that. It was really moving to see it. And we got a little bit closer and saw it there. Fantastic. Not climbed very much. There's only a very short window in the year where you can climb it. But wonderful thing to see. Tokyo is a very typical big city, but it has some little places that are rather fantastic. You just turn a corner and you find them. That was the first one. If you just look carefully, these are my husband's feet. And I wouldn't do it, I couldn't walk on that, but it was on top of Tokyo Tower, which is like Blackpool Tower, and that of course is a car park just right at the bottom, but the view was worth making the trip up to the top. And that's the view. So you can see it is a typical big city, except you don't often get restaurants like that and spaces, but there's a lot of high rise in there. But there are some beautiful places. There are interesting places like a Skiji fish market, which there are acres and acres, and I'm not exaggerating, of fish stalls there. It's one of the biggest fish markets in the world, and it was incredible walking through it. fish, I would never have known that they existed. I couldn't have told you half the names. Tuna heads, this size, and a number of stalls that says no photographs taken. Don't know why, but that was it. But that was an interesting experience. And thousands of sushi and sashimi shops around it, selling the best sashimi in the world. And this is Sensoji Temple, and again we were just walking through Tokyo and we just turned a corner and there was this. You don't get that in Cardiff or London, do you? And it was marvellous, marvellous place. It was really, and not terribly crowded. That's the entrance, and there are gate guards here, and these big, I suppose they're lanterns. There's always a gate guard there, and this is the big Tory gate to go into it. And the second time we visited, there was a parade going on. We had no idea, because that's the only problem with not being able to speak the language you can't ask. But we did discover these beautiful geisha girls are all fellas. Really? And in fact, they are kabuki players. Kabuki is a form of theatre in Japan, and there is never a woman on stage. They are all men. And, I mean, they really look quite okay, don't they? You can see their shoes. They have special socks where they have just a space between the big toe and the next toe. And the sandals, and some of them are quite that big. Really, they look very uncomfortable. Anyway, they were ahead of this procession going through, and it ended up in front of the temple, and these people here are kabuki players, and a kabuki actor takes on a role for life, and so he will do the same performance, take the same role, and once he gets too old to do it anymore, he hands it on to his son. And then his son does it, and then he hands it on to his son. So there is 3 generations there, because the grandfather was handing it on to the father, and they go to the temple to be blessed. We did see a kabuki performance. It started at 11:30 in the morning, and it finished at 4:30 in the afternoon. We took our lunch, and there were 4 different plays through the day, and it was absolutely fascinating. It really was. You didn't need to speak Japanese. In fact, we did have an English translation in our ear, but you didn't need to speak it. It was just spectacular. Couldn't take pictures though, so sorry. This is Ueno Park, probably just a standard park, but with a beautiful walkway to the temple. These are lanterns, stone lanterns along here. There's the temple at the end with the beautiful gold on it. And there are messages that people have written. Every language, I could read some of them. It wasn't just Japanese, there were languages from all over the world. You do get some tourists in Tokyo, nowhere near as much as you would in Cardiff, Swansea, anywhere, because the Japanese are still very, very much, very insular, so there's only a small percentage of foreigners there. We're quite obvious and quite evident when we go there. We do look different. But that was very interesting to see those. Kamakura. Kamakura is the original medieval capital of Japan, and it's a beautiful place about half an hour away from Tokyo, with a giant Buddha. And I mean, he is huge. I don't know if you can see, there's some oranges there just to show you. And he used to be in a temple, and there was a typhoon. The temple got totally destroyed, and the Buddha was untouched. And he is huge. And then there are beautiful temples like that. There were a lot of temples all in the hills around Kamakura. It was a lovely, peaceful place, and of course, immaculately clean. This was a tea house that we went into and had proper green tea, again, the very strong green stuff, and a cake. I've heard we've got cake later that's at the back. I hope it's better than what we had there. Most of the stuff we've eaten in Japan has been lovely, but this was like a boiled suet thing with a bit of chestnut puree in the middle. It was as bad as it sounds. Nikko. I don't know whether anybody's heard of Nikko, but it is famous for one thing. It was a wet day when we visited there, but fantastic temples, glorious carvings, really amazing. You can see all the umbrellas, but it's famous for that. Now you all know what that is, don't you? Yes, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no. That was where they originated from. Beautiful carvings, as you can see, all along there, and these wonderful roofs, just gorgeous. And this looked like white marble. I don't know what it was, but carving is incredibly intricate, really beautiful. Now, this was where we went for Christmas, and we had 3 days up in the Japanese Alps at Gokuyama and Shirakawa-go. And I put these up because I think I can say them, but it's easier if you can see what the wording looks like. And that's the sort of thing. We were lucky because they'd had snow, and yet we had blue sky and sunshine, a bit like it is today. And these are gasho houses, and that means praying hands. And you can see why, can't you? You can see the roof. The shape of the roof is like praying hands because, of course, the snow will fall off them and won't sort of smother them. I don't know how many, couple of feet of snow we had. And the people that used to live in them bred and kept their silkworms in the roof. There are only about 150 left in the whole world, so they are a World Heritage Site, and Japan has a number of World Heritage Sites. And there is the beginnings of these gasho houses. You can see how much snow there was there. It was beautiful. It just really was beautiful, right up in the mountains. And then there are these gasho houses. And you could walk all amongst those. They're really lovely with all this beautiful shape of roof. And that's where they grew their silkworms. We did go inside. It was quite interesting. It's all wood. It's all wood inside. And I think I'm right in saying, my husband's here, he's going to correct me if I'm not, there were no nails. They were all so beautifully carved in the ceiling, in the roof trusses, that it all fitted perfectly together. Very interesting. But spectacular. It really was spectacular. I think there's a dog somewhere there. Anyway. This is a bit of a jump, isn't it? Hiroshima. I didn't think I wanted to go there. Not that one should ever forget some of the atrocities, but, sometimes you perhaps just need to tuck them in the back of your mind. However, our son Dan wanted to go because there was a certain place that he wanted to see there. And so we all went to Hiroshima, and it was well worth going to, because instead of it being a deeply depressing place, it was actually a very hopeful, positive place. Hiroshima is there. So we've come from Tokyo and come all the way along here. Hiroshima is there. And there we are. That's at the entrance of the Peace Memorial Park. Difficult to read, but it was August the 5th, 1945, when they dropped the bomb, and it went from, a normal city to just devastation in split seconds. And that is about the only building that was left that was recognisable, and they have kept that as a memorial and built the Peace Park round it. And when we went round it, there were lots of school parties round there, and the children were being taught about the history. I think it must be very difficult for anybody that had close involvement with the awful things that happened out in there or with the Japanese, but I would like to feel that we can move forward from that. And certainly the Japanese, I think, are very genuine in trying to make peace, not war. And in fact, I think their constitution now will not allow them to attack or do anything untoward to another country. It is just unconstitutional, it's not allowed. But this was amazing. It had azaleas all around here, so there's lovely colour, and this river. And we went there's the Eternal Flame is just there. And this is all the Peace Park round it, with various memorials to different people and different countries. And from Hiroshima, we went across the water to Miyajima. And that was sort of almost an integral part of Hiroshima, to this temple that was orange. It's a good luck colour. And when the tide is in, it floats on water. When the tide is out, it's obviously on land. And it was a fascinating place to visit. And this was what our son wanted to see, was this. A gate to a shrine is called a torii, but this one is set in the water. And unfortunately, 3 weeks before we arrived there, they'd had a big storm and it got damaged, so it was wrapped in cling film and scaffolding, which was very disappointing. But we did have the bonus of this wedding. Here's the bride with her hat, and the bridegroom, and this spectacular dancer that was, again, another very rare experience to see. It was just disappointing about the torii. Miyajima Island is a special island. You cannot die and you cannot give birth on it. You're not allowed. Don't know what happens if something untoward happens, or if you go into labour early or whatever. But there are no hospitals. There are no graveyards on it. You have to go back to the mainland. I don't know whether anybody's ever seen Himeji Castle. That was an image that when I first went out to Japan, it was a place I wanted to see. Its nickname is Crow Castle. It was very dramatic. There are a few around like it, but they're not like our National Trust properties. There is nothing inside. They're all made of wood, but there's nothing inside. So you can climb to the top and get a wonderful view, but you can't admire any furniture or anything like that. But it was a beautiful, beautiful place, beautiful castle. See, this little sort of, I don't know, does it look like a crow? Not really. And of course they always have beautiful gardens. The Japanese do their gardens beautifully. Kyoto. Another one, I can't remember how many hundreds of temples and shrines there are. We went round some of them. There's one of them that goes, Kiyomazadera Temple. It goes up on the side of the hill and it's on stilts when you get to the top. And it has the water of eternal life at the top, which they all go and drink. I don't know whether it works or not, but it's worth a try. And the Golden Temple, that was beautiful. And I always thought that if it had been a nice day and the water hadn't been ruffled up a bit, it would have been a fantastic reflection. You couldn't go near it. But that was beautiful. And Todaiji Temple, which was huge, and it had a Buddha inside it that was so tall that he looked out of that window, and he sits there with a hand out like that, and you can get 4 monks on his hand. That's how big he is. That's just a few of them. And these are all World Heritage Sites. They are just amazing. Ryokan is a traditional Japanese hotel, and if ever you go out to Japan, you ought to experience it. The beds are dreadful, because they're futons on the floor, and they really are quite hard going on the back, but an experience well worth it. It's the entrance to the Ryokan, and there's the sort of living room. Probably because we were Westerners, we were given a couple of chairs that you could sit on, but not everyone we visited does that. You normally sit on the floor, either on your knees or with your feet under there, and you will get served green tea, and you will have your yukata, your informal kimono to wear in the evening. And when you go out for your meal, my husband dressed in his yukata, you come back to find your bed made on the floor. All the bedding will have been in a cupboard. But I tell you what, it was jolly hard, really hard, but worth a try. And they often have, it doesn't look as funny as it should be, they will have their own onsen, which are public baths. We went to one up in Hakone where the water is heated by the natural rock, but there is a certain way of doing this. You do not get in the bath and then soap yourself down. You do it all outside. You sit on there and you use all the shampoos and everything, and then you shower yourself off, and then you get in the onsen. And this onsen was outside. And it was beautiful because, again, I don't know if you can see it, our grandson is actually there. This water is coming in this side and out that side, and it's heated by the natural elements in the ground. And there is a high fence, so you're entirely decent. And you just were outside, and it was lovely. It was a really lovely experience. Very hot, when I first tried these on then, I thought I couldn't get my big toe in, but I did get to it. Feels lovely afterwards. The Japanese are great bathers. They do like their baths and showers. We came across a number of weddings, and of course, if you remember at the beginning, I said to you that we went out for our son's wedding the first time we went out there, and so you do happen to notice weddings, and I am going to show you their wedding because it was very special. But the ones that we've caught meanwhile, this was just little glimpses that we saw of people, and obviously this is a photo opportunity, isn't it? Because you can see these two reflected here. They don't necessarily wear white, but there seems to be a variety of different costumes for weddings, but we saw them in all sorts of really interesting places. This was in the Meiji temple, and she's got this wonderful hat on, and he's got his beautiful outfit. I did say to Aki, are you going to wear a hat like that? And she said, no fear. But it looks right when it's in the right setting. And there was this one on Miyajima Island, and this dancer was just extraordinary. I did video it, and I can't find the video, which is really disappointing. But you can see there's the bride and groom and all their guests watching this. Apparently it's a popular place to get married, but I'm sure it was jolly expensive too. And there he is, the hand movements and the gracefulness, and he had a wonderful mask on and this fantastic costume. Really, really amazing. This one you have to look carefully at, but why I photographed it was this row of shoes at the bottom, because you can't wear your shoes into the temple, you can't wear your shoes into a lot of places. And I just thought, there you are, dressed to the nines. There's the bride in a multicoloured kimono, and the bridegroom, and all the guests are there, but they've all taken their shoes off. And now I'm going to show you ours, because it was an amazing experience. We were allowed to watch them dress. They had four dressers with them the whole day. Our son is a bit of an extrovert, and he said, we just want to do it really, really specially, and so they did. And fair dues, he did dress in his outfit, and Aki dressed in hers. There were a series of pictures. This is Dan. He had about 5 different layers on, with his own lady to dress him, and the obi round the middle, which is the belt. His was narrower than the ladies, but it was tied in a very intricate knot, as you can see. And then they put a jacket over it, so you've got a funny lump sticking out the back, but it still looked very good. And then this is Aki, and she had, I don't know how many different layers on, plus an outside coat over her kimono, and it was cream silk with cranes on it again. And there they are, fully dressed. She has got it lifted up so she can walk. I don't know whether you can see her shoes are about 3 inches high, and she's about 5'1", and Dan is about 6'1". He does, and he's blonde, of course, so he does stand out in Japan. And this is his mother-in-law, and these are her 2 sisters. One of them has opted to dress in Western dress, but Hideko is unmarried, so she doesn't wear black to a wedding, but married women do. So I wore black to the wedding. But Hideko wore a beautiful kimono, but not in black. Miyako's kimono is about 25 years old, but cost thousands of pounds. It's obviously a very special, only worn on special occasions, and she looked beautiful in it. She really did, and Aki's lovely outfit. This is pre-wedding. This is greeting all the guests. Thankfully, we Westerners were given seats to sit on, but the Japanese all sat on the floor except for the bride and groom. And then we processed to the temple under the torii, the gate, and the lovely red parasol. Just missed the picture of the priest who's wearing a pudding bowl on his head. I think was probably about the best way of doing it. You can see all the different outfits. That's Aki's dad, and he was just dressed in ordinary, formal morning dress, we call it, don't we? But Dan decided he wanted to be dressed properly. And there they are in the temple, and I have to relate this to our church-type ones. This is like the altar. There's the priest, and there's a lady priestess there. The family were up on a dais, and we were here and here. Her family that side, and Dan's family this side. And they took their vows up there. Very proud Dan did it all in Japanese, and that was quite early on in his time there, so he did well with that. And I love this picture because the priest is blessing the rest of them down there, the audience, with a floor mop. Like this, you see. It was peculiar, but it looked very suitable, and you can't quite see, but he's got a pudding bowl on his head. And that's the chief priest talking to them. Look how beautifully her sleeves have been arranged. And then they had sake, and part of the tradition in the wedding is that you have 3 bowls of sake, and you have 3 sips of sake out of each bowl, and then you pass it to the bride. Probably the bridegroom had it first, and then the bride. And then a member. This shows you the difference between Japanese and English. This is Aki's father, and this is our middle son, little and large. And a member of both families came up to the altar, and these leaves here, they had to turn over. And again, I got this in translation, but it was to signify the joining of not just the man and the woman, but the 2 families, which I thought was lovely. Nice thought, that. And there we are. That's one of the family photographs to show us with all the Japanese, which was good. But you can see how tall he is, can't you, compared to them. Aki then took her outer coat off and had her hair decorations changed, and her obi, and this little colour around here. This was for the reception. She has a notebook, and there should be a dagger somewhere there as well. I said to her, why have you got a dagger? And she said, well, in the olden days, if something happened to your husband, you committed hara-kiri, but now it's just a symbol. And I thought, oh, that's fine. That's probably what that is. It's interesting, isn't it? It's more of these traditions and ceremonies. And there they are. That's them entering the wedding reception and bowing to all their guests. And that brought a lump to my throat. That did. The reception was interesting because, of course, it was mainly in Japanese, but there were translations, and there was lots of fun aspects of it. And Dan wanted a proper English dinner, and that's Japanese version of fish and chips. So I think it's a fish cake and a chip. And I think, yes, roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. The chef did have a problem with the Yorkshire pudding, but it took him a while to grasp it, but he got it in the end. And I think we had apple crumble at the end, but I can't remember, and I didn't take a photograph of that. That's the wedding cake. There's apparently a bit of tartan there because Dan was born in Scotland, but I didn't remember it. And then these, I've got a few over there. This is just to show you. These are wedding present cards, and you don't buy them a set of towels or a kettle or anything like that. You give them money, and depending on where your relationship is with them, if you're an auntie or a cousin or just a friend, a certain amount goes in there, and it goes in the envelope. I mean, you can look at them afterwards, especially. They are absolute works of art. And so when they brought them home after the wedding reception, I said to Dan, what's going to happen to those? Oh, we'll chuck them out. So we did. I said, could I take a few home with me? And they have been. I'm really glad we did, because they really are beautiful. I think that the writing on them says who they're from, but if any of you can read kanji, please will you correct me, because I might be wrong on that one. I'm not sure. So there we are. So I'm just going to say that what we discovered was a very friendly people, a fascinating culture, amazing architecture, awe-inspiring landscapes, and delicious food. We discovered a country that was clean, that was very safe, and a wonderful mixture of ancient and modern. Really fascinating. We discovered a warm, welcoming family, and we also found that you can communicate with anybody even if you don't speak their language, and you can become friends. And we feel really privileged and very lucky to have discovered Japan. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Does anyone have any questions? Is there anyone right?
Yes.
Have you got the mic just so I can be fair to you? Well, I'll try if you haven't got the mic.
Yeah. May I say, first of all, how wonderful that was, and you opened up so many sort of points to us. You did touch on the fact that the temples, that they're not a religious people, and yet we saw temple after temple, and Buddha's there as well. You also mentioned the priest at the wedding ceremony. I wonder if you could just enlarge a little bit on that, as to how these temples were first built. Were they not built as part of a religious belief, and this is perhaps eased over the decades, the centuries? There's such a strong representation of seeming discipline enhanced by religion.
What a good question. Can I go home now, please? No, I think it's a wonderful question, and it's a very insightful question, and it's one I've been trying to work out since we've been going there. We've been now 4 times. One of the problems with the language, and even with Aki, who speaks, she's completely bilingual, and Daniel is now very good with the Japanese, do miss some things in translation, and we haven't been able to quite work out how it works. They are very disciplined about this. I mean, none of them just, you know, how we might find in this country, if I'm not too cynical, how people just walk past churches or have no real respect for it. They have huge respect for it, but I actually haven't worked out quite what the significance of the religion is. Maybe it is just the discipline. They are Buddhists or Shintos, and I think there's only about 2% that are Christians. So they're mainly Buddhist and Shinto. And I tried reading up on it to try and work out. One deals more with the life side of it, and the other deals with the death side of it. But I still haven't worked it out. So I'm going to be really awful and say I actually don't know. But I have to say that the temples and the shrines are wonderful pieces of architecture, if nothing else. But there is a very spiritual feel about them when you go inside. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but there is huge amount of dignity and very peaceful. And so even if it's not religious, there is something very calming and spiritual about it. Thank you for that question. It made me not be able to answer it, but it was a good one. Anybody else?
I'll try and shout.
Will you?
With your experience of families, they've got small apartments.
Yes.
What sort of family sizes do they tend to have? There's not been restrictions like China. Do they
No.
have 1 or 2 children or more?
A bit of all of that, really, because I suspect, I mean, I haven't been personal enough to ask Dan and Aki if they're going to have any more. Our grandson is 4.5 now, and I suspect he will be the only one. And of course, they're part of this generation that are getting married later and having their children later. They're both 40 this year, so time runs out. But we have seen families over in Japan with 3 children. That is quite a lot to see 3. You will usually see 1 or 2. But interestingly, the apartment that they have is not that small. But the Japanese are very short of space. I think something like 75% of the Japanese live in 25% of the country, because there's so many mountains and hills that are completely inhabitable, so they're uninhabitable, so they live along the coast in general. But I would say they're actually getting quite concerned about it, because with the birth rate down, and it has been down, and Japanese women are starting not to want to get married and have families, they're wanting to have careers, and they are now concerned about the birth rate in Japan. and they are trying to encourage them to have more children, because I think Dan told us that Japan could be obsolete in 2050 if they didn't get a move on and have a few more children. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. They're also living much longer.
They are, yes. I mean, they're very healthy. Both Dan's both Dan's in-laws are well into their 60s, but you wouldn't know it. And of course, very few of them are overweight because of their very healthy diet, and they live very, very long lives. And they're now going to start finding the problems that we have in this country, where, am I affecting this? Oh, right. That, somebody's got to care for the older people, haven't they? They are very fit, though. They do seem to be very fit. Come on. This is lovely. I don't usually get questions. This is good.
Was it unusual for your daughter-in-law to come to Britain to study?
Sorry, the lady asked, was it unusual for our daughter-in-law to come to Britain? No, because they are very impressed by the the British education system, and from what we can gather, and I will always say this is what we gather from conversations that go through translation with the family, that the education system over in Japan is very good, but it produces clones. They don't like individuals. There's a saying in Japan that if the nail sticks up, you hammer it down. So they will educate them all to be exactly the same. Getting a decision made in Japan is very difficult. And so certainly our son is concerned because they don't seem to encourage creativity and individuals. Now, that's surprising when you think about some of the achievements of Japan, but getting decisions made, everybody's got to agree. You can't say, well, we'll have the majority. It's got to be everybody, and that actually is very difficult. It really is very difficult.
Is that family you speak with, are they typical? Are they very wealthy? Or I don't like to be too personal.
No, it's fine. I don't know whether you can hear these questions. So
Did you see any poor people?
yes, so the question was about our family. No, they are not typical Japanese. I think the fact that we've had such wonderful family parties where we've cried with laughter over things. It's been a great leveler, it's been a great icebreaker, but I would say they are not typical. They do speak a little bit of English, and they have got a great sense of humour which they're not afraid to show, because the Japanese, I said to Dan, they're very cold, aren't they? And he said, no, Mum, they're not at all cold. They are just controlled. They don't believe in being, extravagant. But, we've seen Aki's father reciting, to be or not to be, that is the question. And to hear that in a very broad Japanese accent, he hasn't a clue what he's saying, but he has remembered it, And so we've had lots of laughter, and that's been why we've found ourselves so close to the family. I would say the family are quite comfortably off. He's owned a building company, and he has a large house, a detached house. He has a house in the Japanese Alps, and I think our grandson is going to be very well off when they finally all go. They've got another daughter who has 2 girls, but they're girls and he's a boy. And I'm afraid it still happens that, but we have seen my husband went for a walk along the river and saw a few of the homeless people along there, but they keep them very well out of sight. You don't admit to that. Right?
Have your oldest generation come over to stay with you?
Up till this, sorry, the lady asked if they have been over to see us. Up till this talk, I would have said no, but I have to say that we had the best Christmas ever, because we had the whole of our little family plus the in-laws over at Christmas time, and we just had a magic time. Poor Marcia knows every detail of it because I bored her with it, but it was just such a joy. And although we see them regularly on Skype, and the little one's English is very good, he just blossomed over here, and his English just came tumbling out, which was wonderful. And Dan wanted him to be able to run through the woods and kick up leaves. That was the thing that he wanted him to do. So he did. And of course, we did everything. We had a really British Christmas. We had to do the whole work. Santa called, Christmas stockings, stuff out for Santa. Wanted a glass of brandy and a piece of toast for when he called, and things like that. Just magic. Christmas is for children, and it was lovely. And the in-laws, they thought we ate too many potatoes. But they did. I think they enjoyed it, and it was so lovely to be able to repay a little of the wonderful hospitality we've had in Japan, because they have made us so welcome right from the beginning. The only problem we had once was we were with them. I think it was the day after the wedding, and Dan and Aki were having a night in the hotel by themselves, and so Miyako was making us breakfast, and she said in very broken English, "You like salad?" Well, I'll be polite. Yes, we ate salad. So we had salad for breakfast. I didn't think that's what she meant, but it's obviously what she did mean. But it wasn't a problem. They are lovely people. So.
You say they were very, very friendly and very welcoming. Yet they have. You say they're very friendly and very welcoming, and they have this demographic problem of an aging population and not enough children. But they're very anti-immigration. Why is it? Did you sense that they are resistant to non-Japanese people moving in to help the population challenge?
I don't think we've never come across a problem. I mean, we are obviously not Japanese. We're very evidently not Japanese. So whenever we meet people, they know that we are Westerners, and we've always been made hugely welcome. I think the Japanese have been very insular, and they are just beginning to come out. I mean, they're hosting the Olympics in 2020, aren't they? They are going to welcome the world. And so, I don't know. Dan he's had taken quite a long time to get somewhere with work, but he's always been employed, and in the last year, he's actually been made a permanent employee, which is a huge step for a Cajun, a foreigner. It is unusual, but they like his work ethic, which is just like theirs, where you work and work and work. They do work ridiculous hours. But I think they sneakingly quite like the fact that he will also speak his mind, which not all Japanese will, because they don't want to offend. So if you were to say, is that the way to so-and-so, they go, yes, even if it isn't, because they don't want to say no to you. Dan said he went halfway down the main Japanese island before because somebody told him wrong. So as far as immigration is concerned, I think it's gradually improving. I would say they're probably about 50 years behind the general Western world. But that's only what I personally see. Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
That's all right, and I'll repeat it anyway.
Your son Dan, can he actually become Japanese?
No.
Because I didn't think he could.
No.
So you can live there, but you can never become Japanese.
No, he can't vote. He's very disappointed about that because he said, I'm giving my taxes, I'm working with the Japanese, but I cannot ever become. But I think he would never want to lose his English nationality. And our grandson has joint nationality. And Dan is very definite that will stay. And I suspect that Chun-chan will have some of his education in UK because he does not want him to just become one of a great crowd of very well-educated but very unspectacular people.
Did you have any spin-off from the Second World War?
Did we have any spin-off from the Second World War? No, but I went over there feeling embarrassed, thinking, does one say anything? I mean, it doesn't really crop up in conversation, but there has never been any discomfort about it or any unpleasantness. And actually, if I make it personal for a moment, my sister-in-law, her father was a Japanese prisoner of war, and I know he never talked about it, but we knew that he obviously had a horrendous experience. He died before Dan married Aki, and I did say to my sister-in-law, are you going to be able to cope with one of your very favourite nephews marrying a Japanese girl? And she said, of course. She said, we cannot, whatever atrocities any of us committed, we cannot go on thinking about what happened in the past. You don't forget it, but you have to move forward. And I thought she was wonderfully big-hearted, and she took Aki to her heart as well as Dan, and she loves them both, and her great nephew as well. So yes, but we've never had any unpleasantness or on either side.
Excuse me, may I ask just one more question? You referred to the longevity of life and also showed pictorially some lovely pictures where there are no seats at all. Well, bearing in mind our age here, I think we'd be a little bit at unease if we entered rooms and there weren't any chairs or anything. Does this suggest that in longevity that the Japanese do not suffer from hip problems, from joint problems, from never visit the orthopedic department? It seems to me that there's a huge difference in the Western way of life and our own and the Japanese way of life. I remember at school on one occasion having a question, would you always seek to impose the Western way of life to the benefit of those in the Far East? In those younger days, I used to say yes. I don't think I'd say it now, but I am interested on this health question. Is it a fact that you just don't see problems with joints?
No, you do not. You do not see questions. But it's interesting. You saw the size of Dan's in-laws. I mean, they are tiny. You only see a few overweight people, be they young or old. And their diet, it's always fresh. Because they live in small places, you can't buy enough for a month. You go out and buy fresh food every day. And, so the food is fresh, the fish. And, of course, fish is very good for our joints, isn't it? They eat a huge amount of fish. And so their diet has an incredible effect on how they are. I think, in general, yes, they are much healthier than we are, and they don't seem... Isn't it sickening? Yes, they don't seem to have the joint problems. And yes, they do seem to just live. They do have cancer over there, but I mean, we haven't come across that. Touch wood. All our family are very fit and healthy, and they all seem like that. It's wonderful, isn't it? Perhaps we all ought to move to Japan, or adopt their diet. Perhaps that's probably the better thing.